If you have inherited a globally known business built by your granddad and your dad, would you leave that to start something from scratch without any support from the family? And that is when you're only 23. Well, in today's internet age, you may get a rare yes to that question. But in 1950s, I can tell you about myself, I would rather go and do whatever my family asked me to do. But there was someone who did not do that. And he did it so well by creating a new company from scratch without the support from the family. With his perseverance and courage against all odds, he ended up making that company a multi-billion-dollar firm. And you guessed it right, we are talking about Reebok, the shoe company, which was sold to Adidas for nearly $4 billion. And the man was none other than the founder of Reebok, Mr. Joe Foster. So hold on tight. If you want to learn how to bounce back from adversities and shine like a star, because we have none other than Mr. Joe Foster himself on the show. And I'm so excited to welcome you. Welcome to the show, sir.
Well, what a magnificent introduction to me, Ajay. That's absolutely fantastic. Possibly overstates it a bit. You know, we we did what we needed to do. But thank you very much for that invitation, that introduction. Incredible.
Thank you, sir. I can recall my first sports shoes were from Reebok, actually. And they were, I still remember because I was a kid. You remember what your childhood really well. It was teal color fabric with the white material, which I think was leather. I'm not a shoe expert still. And I really loved them. And I didn't know that one day I will be talking to the legendary founder of the company itself. But here we are. So first of all, I would personally like to thank you for writing the book Shoemaker and sharing your stories with the world.
Oh, that's fine. It was something I needed to do because the world didn't know how Reebok started. And we got so many Wikipedia and Google sort of messages which were wrong. So I sat down and decided, let's get the story straight.
Yeah, definitely. And to my audience, if you, I mean, Joe took really hard decisions and you have it all in this. It's not just a company. It's not a business book. It's a book which can be used in any aspect of your life. It's a book of passion, courage, and perseverance. I highly recommend. I have read it cover to cover. I highly recommend everybody should go and buy it and read it. It's amazing. So with that, I will start my first question, which is, when you decided to launch Reebok, well, it used to be Mercury at the time, your dad didn't support your ambition. And you were only 23. Now I'm thinking, how did you gather that confidence and courage to go against the wills of your dad and launch a company with your brother? So tell us more about that challenge and how did you face it really?
Well, I can certainly tell you about the challenge. And yes, we were 23 and 25. And you know, that's a good age because you're indestructible. You can do anything at that age. It doesn't matter. And if you fail, you can get up and go again. So in terms of the courage, I think I don't know, it may be stupidity, it may be just youth that does it. We can do it. Because my grandfather, at 15 years of age, in 1895, he made for himself a pair of running shoes with spikes in the bottom. He got the idea from his grandfather, who was a cobbler and who repaired cricket boots. And cricket boots had spikes in the bottom. And my grandfather asked him, he obviously asked him, why do they have spikes in the bottom? And the obvious answer would be, it gives them grip. So that must have struck home with my grandfather. And he thought, he was a member of his local athletics club. And he thought, if I could put spikes in the bottom of a pair of shoes, maybe I would get better grip when I'm running. And that would improve my performance. So that's something that drove my grandfather. But you know, he was quite a genius in many ways, because not only is he credited with inventing the spike running shoe, he also invented the training shoe. And you know, a whole massive business has grown up from that over the last century, because we're talking about 1895 when he first made his shoes. But by 1904, he had 3 world records broken in his shoes. So he knew how to influence people by giving the shoes to the right people. And he gave shoes to the right people. And in that first decade of the 20th century, he had many gold medals and also world records. The second decade, we had World War One. They didn't make running shoes during that period. So it was a big period when he did. But in the 20s, that was his belle epoque. That was I would say, the decade of my grandfather, J.W. Foster and Sons shoes. That's where they supplied lots of. In 1920, and we have a letterhead that this is printed on. In 1920, he supplied, in his words, all the Olympic competitors at Antwerp. In the Antwerp Olympic Games in 1920, he supplied all the Olympic athletes. And of course, he got gold medals, as you would expect. And during the 20s, he got gold medals with Eric Liddell, Harold Abrahams, and Lord Burleigh. And they were the three people immortalized in the film Chariots of Fire. I don't know if you've seen it, but Chariots of Fire, you possibly heard about it. Chariots of Fire, quite famous. But my grandfather actually supplied the shoes that they wore to get their gold medals. But unfortunately, my grandfather died in 1933, quite young. He was only 53. And I wasn't born until 1935. And the thing is, I was born on his birthday. So my grandfather died 18th of May. He died 15 months before I was born. So grandma was quite a fiery woman, and she said, he's brought his name with him. So I became Joseph William, just as my grandfather had been Joseph William. And that is in 1935. 4 years later, we have World War II. So that's 6 years out of, you say, your life. But no, we were kids. We enjoyed our life. You know, you don't recognize what's going on. You just enjoy life. But I was 10 when the lights came on again and life got back to normal. Education started properly. We did have education, but it really started properly. And I joined the J.W. Foster business after being to college. I joined in 1952. So I joined the business. And I only had 12 months because in 1953, we had to do national service. And I say we because Jeff also was in the company. He'd been in the company longer, but by chance, we both went at the same time to do 2 years of national service. Jeff did his in Germany, where he saw Adidas and Puma, and he's seeing the shoes they were making. So when we came back, 1955, we come back into the company, and you know, you say, where do you get that courage, that spirit? I think 2 years being away from the family, doing national service, you learn an awful lot about how to be independent, how to see life, what you're looking at. You look at things in a different way. You know, your mother is no longer there to do your washing, do all the things for you. And so after those 2 years, we come back to a failing company. We see it failing. My father and uncle, they had inherited the company from my grandfather, but there was 6 years difference between them in age. And for whatever reason, they were feuding, a bit like Adi Dassler and Rudy Dassler. You know, they were feuding, but fortunately for them, Rudy decided to leave, go the other side of the river at Terzagonra and set up Puma. So that didn't happen in the J.W. Foster company. They just kept fighting and not talking. So Jeff and I, we tried the best we could to get them to understand, you know, the company's not going anywhere, the company's going down. And all my father could say was, well, look, when your Uncle Bill is gone and I am gone, the company will be yours. You can do what you like with it. You know, and the obvious answer was, look, Dad, number one, we don't want you to go. You know, we don't see that as having to wait for our lives. You've got to sort of die. But number two is this company will be dead long before that happens. It will die. The way you're going now, it can't happen. But we asked him if he would sort of come join us, come with us. We could set up a different company. But no, he was too set in his ways and too set in whatever he was doing. So by 1958, Jeff and I, we'd been to college again to learn about shoemaking. we knew how to make the shoes that we were making, but we needed to know about materials. We needed to know other things, machinery. So, and that was a good move, because when we went there, we made a lot of friends. We made friends with the people who were there, who were in shoemaking and in the college, and we could get a lot of advice from where to get machinery and other things. So that was a good move. But in 1958, we'd had enough. And I told my father, we're leaving. We're going to set up our own company, which we did. And we left and we set up Mercury Sports Footwear.
Well done. Very good. And thanks for telling me. I didn't know that Adidas and Puma were also from brothers.
Mm. Yes, you should read Sneakonomics. No, you should listen to Sneakonomics. Sneakonomics have been produced by the BBC. Julie will tell me where you can get it from.
BBC Sound, BBC iPlayer.
Yeah, BBC Sounds. It's in their app, and there are 9 episodes, and you would find it fascinating. You'll be able to hear all about Adidas and Puma and Reebok, and I am dramatized in there a little bit.
Okay, so you were born on the same date as your grandfather, and your grandmother thought that, okay, let's give the same name to you. Do you feel that you had his traits also, although you've never met him? But is it some sort of reincarnation happening, and doing J.W. Foster and Sons again, giving it a different name? What do you feel about it?
Well, I think there's an incredible coincidence, but I felt that probably when I was maybe 30 years old, when we had our own business and we were doing things. I am thinking that, well, it's very odd that I'm born on his birthday, just 15 months after he died. So it's a quirk of coincidence, whatever one wants to believe in that. But I probably inherited some DNA from my grandfather, because my father and uncle, they didn't see how to develop the business. Whereas obviously their father, my grandfather, he built a business, a fantastic business. But his sons were just allowing it to go. Whereas Jeff and myself, we could see this. We needed to change. Now, Jeff, all he wanted to do was to run the factory. So when we set up the factory, Jeff would run the factory. In the first couple of years or so, we both worked in the factory. It took a while to get off the ground. And then Jeff was sort of saying, look, you do everything else, Joe. He loved the factory. When it came to anything else that needed doing, which was marketing, plans, and going to see the bank manager, things like that, Jeff left that to me. He said, no, you can do that. So that's why I sort of took on the role of, well, I suppose, you say, leading the company in wherever it was going.
Okay, yeah. And Reebok was not Reebok when it was launched. It was Mercury, right? And changed the name because Mercury was a name taken by some other company. And I believe you had a vision to bring Reebok to the world stage in every single country. And that's the reason you did so much of research. I mean, there is a chapter about finding the name Reebok from the dictionary that you won in the race. And you made sure that this name has not been taken in the countries where you wanting to launch it. So I wanted to know, at that point when you started Mercury, you had it in mind that you're going to take it to every single country possible in the world, or it just happened as you start seeing progress? What was your initial vision with Mercury and Reebok?
Well, as I said before, we really left J.W. Foster by necessity. The company was going down. We had to do something. So for us, it was taking on the challenge of setting up our own business, because at least that way it would be in our hands if we grew it or if we didn't grow it, and if we were successful or not. So I think in those early days, it was a matter of just setting up a business, just carrying on something. We probably felt disappointed that the Foster business really, it had a place and it should have been growing. They should have been looking at everything, football, and they did make football boots, but they were not looking to grow the business. It was whatever came in was fine. They didn't have anybody selling the shoes. They relied upon advertisements, and that was it. So I guess when we left, our desire was to set up a company that was really, and its intention was to build. Its intention was to grow and to develop as a business. I don't think at that point we had any idea that we would become the biggest company in the world, the biggest footwear company in the world globally. We didn't, you dream, and it's nice to have a dream, but also, you have to have imagination. And if you've got the imagination, you can keep taking things forward. And I think that we had the imagination, yes, that we could make our company as big as possible. Whether we would be as fortunate to develop a company as famous as in those days, J.W. Foster's, we didn't know. But, I think it was that. We had to carry on the business. We had to do something. We knew how to make shoes. We knew how to make running shoes. So half the reason is like, do you do something else? Do you become something else? I know that we struggled a lot in those early days. And I know my wife on more than one occasion would say to me, why don't you get a proper job? Because it was a struggle. It was a real struggle. But yes, we did have this problem that we couldn't use the name Mercury. We found out it was pre-registered. Our accountant said you've got to register your name because if somebody else starts making Mercury shoes, you would have a problem. You would have to prove that you were the first to make the shoes and things like that. So, and for that, I did use a patent agent to find out how do we change our name? What do we do? And he was the one, he said, bring me 10 names. And I'm saying, oh, how do you do that? We've got to be in love with this. This is our company. Anyway, Jeff and I and our wives, we sat down and started thinking of names like Cougar or Falcon, aggressive names, things that sounded me. And you alluded to my dictionary. In 1943, when I was 8 years old, it was a bit like COVID now, during the war. No, you couldn't travel many places. And so local events, and I won a local race. I think it was about 60-yard race, 60 meters there. And I went up to collect my prize. Yeah, I won this race. I'm 8 years old. And they gave me a dictionary. And I said, a dictionary? Where's the football? I'm a kid, what do I want with a dictionary? And what I didn't know then, this was a Webster's dictionary, and it was an American dictionary. And the Americans spell certain words slightly differently, more phonetic than we do. And but now we're in 1960, looking for a new name, and I open my dictionary. I like the letter R. Good word that. So I start thumbing through R, and I soon come across R-E-B-O-K. Reebok, what's that? And it's a small South African gazelle. Wow, gazelle, perfect. We're a running company, gazelle, why not? That was it, top of the list. Reebok was top of the list. Now, had I been looking at an Oxford English dictionary, I would have found the spelling differently. That would have been R-H-E-B-O-K or even B-O-C-K on occasion. I just wonder if I would have just passed that by. But however, this was the American spelling, R-W-B-O-K. Fantastic. Took it to the agent. He tested all 10 of the names we'd given him. But I did say to him, look, we need this one. We really need to be in love with it. And we just fancy that name, Reebok. And it was the only one that came through. Just one caveat, and that was from the registrar, who said, we have to put you in the B section of the register. I thought a register was a register, A section, B section. Why the B section? Well, because if anybody wants to make, tells us that they're making shoes out of Reebok skin, we can't stop them.
Mm-hmm.
And Jeff and I, we sort of looked at each other and said, that's not going to happen. That just isn't going to happen. We'll take Reebok. And so we registered Reebok. 20 years later, so we're talking about 1970s, the registrar came back with a letter and said, we've moved you to the A section of the register, because everybody now knows that Reebok is a sports shoe. It is not an animal. So that's how we eventually got into the A side of the register.
And now Well, of course, you found it in an American dictionary, but now when you write Reebok on your internet browser, it doesn't give you a spell check error because the word probably had been adopted in dictionaries, all the dictionaries now. And that's what happens with big brands,
Right.
such as Google. Google is not a word, but you type it and the spell check wouldn't say that it's wrong. Something similar with Reebok. So it needs a great effort to make new words. Uh, yeah, that's great. So you mentioned about your brother quite a few times, and I read in the book many stories with him. You both were natural team. You were managing the sales side of it, sales and marketing, and he was more onto the production side. So you kind of spent around 20 years together, and suddenly, sadly, he had to go. So how did you manage with that? Uh, it's really sad to see your brother, the one you grew up with, the one with you made a company, and then he just passes away. How did you deal with that situation and bounce back?
Yeah, it was an incredible sort of two-edged sword happening. A complete disaster that Jeff died of stomach cancer. Something that probably came on because he pushed himself very hard as a runner and as a cyclist. And he would try too hard. And every time he'd finished a race, he was physically sick. And I think that probably had something to do with how we developed stomach cancer. But how did we manage? Well, we were 50-50. Well, we half of each of the company. And that was fine because Jeff just worked in the factory. And he died just at the time when I'd managed to get the American distribution in 1979. He died in 1980. So we just got that going. And so he didn't see the success, didn't see where we went to. I think he'd be pleased that where we eventually got to. But the factory, at that time, the factory became a smaller part of Reebok because we knew we just got a 5-star shoe in Runner's World. And that was the hook that got us into America, 5-star shoe. And at the NSGA show when I went there with our shoe, which was before we got the 5-star rating, but we knew it would get that. We'd made the shoe properly. So yeah, I had Kmart who wanted 25,000 pairs. Well, if we'd accepted that, that was 6 months work for the factory. They also wanted a better price, which meant going to the Far East. This is where footwear was going from the UK. Now, everything was being made in the Far East, being made in South Korea, Indonesia, China, eventually shoe. So our factory would never have coped with what Reebok becoming successful. We knew that. And I had Barter. Barter were willing to start help me make the shoes. They were in the UK. But I also had, I'd made contact with agents in London who were agents for a large South Korean factory conglomerate. So we had both those things covered. So, but I had a factory, and when Jeff had died, it was like, well, we have to find a solution. And so I had to find somebody to come in. We had a foreman, and a foreman who used to run the factory floor. I put him in charge of looking after the factory, and I got a girl who was very, very good girl in the office to just run the company from the office. So we managed to do that. But Jeff, at that point, what would have happened is that I went down to Barter because they were going to make some shoes now that we'd got this 5-star shoe. Jeff would have been doing that. So Jeff would have been more in contact with going probably to the Far East, probably to Korea. And he would have taken that very important role of looking after the product. But of course, that didn't happen. So we had to move a lot of that to America because that's where the growth was coming in. But yes, losing Jeff was a difficult time. And as I say, you lose something. The other side was that I didn't have to talk to anybody when I needed to move the company forward. And so it was a question of making decisions. And where you said maybe I had to talk before and we had to discuss, and there were usually 4 of us because the wives would be there as well. So there'd be Jeff, myself, and there was always that. Well, I guess what I got, why do you have to go to America? Used to be the question. Why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? And I had to justify why I'm going to America, why I'm doing whatever. So, if I could say there's a benefit from Jeff dying, it meant that I could make a decision and I didn't have to consult with 3 other people. And, it seems terrible to say that in some ways there's a benefit, and it's just terrible. It's not, and it's not what I would have liked. I would have loved him to be here today, and if you could change anything, you would. But at that time, I was able to make some very quick decisions, and like making any decisions, if it's right, it's good. If it's wrong, you can change it. So we didn't have a committee. I could make the decisions.
So there are always 2 sides of everything.
Indeed.
Yeah, and I'm curious myself, although I have seen that you were very keen to get into American market and you persisted even after so many setbacks. What was exactly the reason why not EU? Why not Europe? Why US? Of course, you mentioned that Adidas and Puma were there in Europe, but how about US? They didn't have anything at that point, or was it the psychology of the customers that you found attractive? What exactly was the factor that made you work so hard to get into American market?
I think it's quite simple, really, when you think about it. It's Europe was 20-something different countries, all with different languages, and a lot of different cultures. And some were cold countries, some were warm countries. So a lot of different cultures, and each one you have to sort of process. At that time, each one of those countries had to be processed differently. Plus, Adidas and Puma were very strong because they were both in Germany and they both had strong connections throughout Europe. So difficult to get into. Plus athletics, track and field in those days when we started, just track and field. We didn't have road races. The only road race event was a marathon. That was the only road race event in the late 50s. So, but over in America, track and field was big. And every college and every university had coach, and the coach was a god. And you could go on a sports scholarship to a university or college. And so they acknowledged this. It's something I'd picked up from Foster's. Foster's had a contract with 2 coaches who were head coaches at Yale University. And they were sending 200 pairs a month to Yale. And Yale would distribute them to other colleges. The man who was running that, Frank Ryan, he was a bit old by the time we separated from Jerry Foster's, and I think he would have taken on the Reebok brand, but he was, I think he felt it was time for him to retire. So that was a bit of a shame, because at that time it would have been nice to have some continuity. But so I knew the American market slightly, but I knew, and they spoke English. And that's good when you've got somewhere where you've got the same language. So I needed America. As I got my first time to go into America was I was reading a sports magazine, and there was an advertisement in there by the British government. The British government wanted sports companies to export. And to help them, they were willing to pay for a stand at the NSGA show, which is the National Sporting Goods of America. They always had a big show in Chicago. They were willing to pay for the stand, pay for the return airfare, and half of your hotel bill. So, it was cheaper than staying at home. It was like, why not? So with a friend, I wrote in, we took the trip. We went in, and that's 1968. And it was interesting that in 1968, retail sports goods in America, they came to the stand, they loved the shoes. Oh, yes, it is, right? Where do we get them? Well, I said, England. And he said, is that New England? No, it's England. And that was a big put off. They had to import them, and importing, that took a lot of work. So I didn't get any orders. A lot of people loved it, and they said, look, when you get somebody over here, when you've got stock over here that we can buy, we'd love to give you a shoe to try. Great, okay. But this is 1968. It's 1979 before I got Paul Fireman as a distributor. That's 11 years. And in between that time, I had at least 6 failed opportunities or failed experiences where I even had one guy who we were trying to get in there for 4 years. We tried for 4 years with this one guy to try to get in. But we realized we needed more than trying to push the shoe in. We needed something that would pull us in. And that was when Runner's World, who started off as a very small one-page sort of magazine, they were by 1975 a full-blown, full-color magazine telling everybody what shoes they should buy. And that was Bob Anderson, who was the publisher. At first, he said, this is the shoe to buy. And he made one shoe as the number 1 shoe. Well, you know, you've got 350 million people in America, and probably 40 million of those were taken up running by that time. And if you point to one shoe, maybe 10% of those, maybe 4 million say, I love that shoe. And they wanted, and this was Nike. Well, Phil Knight, you can imagine Phil Knight. He would die with delight, and also with how do we handle this? Because he was importing from Japan. And to get them to wind up to sort of all of a sudden make whatever shoes he wanted, you know, instead of ordering 25,000 pair at a time, he was going to be ordering 250,000. It's like, it can't happen. So 12 months would go by. He'd just about start getting to supply against the demand when Bob Anderson, Runner's World, pointed to another shoe and said, this is the number 1 shoe this year. Well, that only happened twice. And after that, the business was in so much trouble, and so was Bob Anderson for doing what he was doing, but he changed it to a star rating. So the top shoe would be 5 stars, but you could have 3 or 4 shoes, 5 stars. And I knew we could make a 5-star shoe. I knew. We had it, we knew exactly. Making a number 1 shoe was difficult because that was a bit arbitrary on part of Bob Anderson, who whatever he would select. But we knew we could get a 5-star shoe, and we made Aztec. We tested it at the Commonwealth Games in Edmonton in 1978. Great, we got a handful of medals, and it was wonderful. And it was February 1979 when the NSGA show again in Chicago, came along and offered the 25,000. But also Paul Fireman came along. He was running Boston Camping, which was a small outdoors company selling camping gear, tents, fishing rods, you name it. And I could see he was a bit fed up with doing this. I think for 10 years, they've been doing about the same trade or whatever. It was going nowhere. So he said, Joe, love to be a distributor. He said, but we need a 5-star shoe. I said, Paul, look, this is it. Yeah, I said, yeah, but it's not got 5 stars yet, has it? He said, no, but it will do. I said, well, you know, I'd love to get in there, but unfortunately, you know, we do need the 5-star shoe before we can commit. That's all right. So I paid a visit to America. I visited Kmart, and the man who I'd seen in Chicago, he was one of 100 people sat at desks. And I thought, can't see this, but I like Paul Fireman. You know, he had a small company, and I could get on with him well. So, and I went to see his Boston camp, and I went over to Boston, saw their outfit. Great. He was running this with his brother, Steve, and his brother-in-law. And right, it was like a nice operation. Yeah, probably sort of a nice start for Reebok. So I'd gone back, but it was, well, the shoe magazine was out in August. That's the edition was in August. But at the end of July, always just a week before the month of the issue, it comes out early. So I phoned Paul and asked him to go. Can he go to the kiosk and get a Runner's World, see how we did? And it was an hour later. He came back and said, Joe, Aztec, 5 stars, fantastic, we're in. But not only did Aztec get 5 stars, also our racing shoe, Midas, got 5 stars, and our spike track shoe got 5 stars, Inca. So that was the gold range. And so it was fantastic. We had 3 5-star shoes to launch in America.
That happened after 11 years and 5, 6 failed attempts that you just mentioned. And I'm just thinking 11 years is a really, really long time to keep trying. So this is an extreme example of perseverance and grit, I would say. What really kept you going? Did it occur to you that after 5, 6 years, you thought, I've had enough, let's go back? Did it ever happen?
No,
What kept you really going?
um, I think that once you can see the target, it may be a moving target. It may be difficult to hit, but if you have perseverance and you have that ambition and you have that integrity to do your best and to really make it, you should never give up on that final goal. Like I said, the race isn't over until you've won. And so for me, it was continuing with this race, continuing. And yes, you keep going. You do keep going. You can see what is happening. You only need to read Runner's World to see the amount of running that was going on, the amount of shoes. So there was a vast market. It was just, how do you get in there? And yes, it took 11 years. And I can look back on it now and it doesn't seem any time at all, but 11 years is a lot. And, but I had a lot of fun because I had at least 6 people. I had one, Brian Fernie down in California. I had another one down in California. I'd one up in Massachusetts, and another one in Philadelphia. The one in Philadelphia, I spent 4 years going backwards and forwards trying to get him going. And he's in the book. Shu Lang, he was I think a second generation immigrant from Russia. A nice guy. Tried his heart, tried everything. But we just needed that hook. And we hadn't got it at that time. The hook came when we got 5-star ratings with Aztec. That was the one. So yes, I mean, I can recall many difficult times, but also, the great times when you go over there and the enthusiasm of the American market. It is fantastic. So yeah, we had to make it, and so we just keep going.
Yeah, there is a great learning in that. And if you have clarity about your goals, then everything else becomes so enjoyable, and it's more likely that you will achieve it, if not today, then tomorrow. So that's really good. What if let's take a hypothetical situation. If it would not be 16 and 70s and 80s, if it would have been happening now in the world of internet and everybody's so connected and everything, what you would have changed in your approach in any area of
I mean, it's difficult. It's difficult to compare which is the best football teams, the one that played in the 1930s or the one that play now. Well, the ball is different. The pitches are different. Everything is now different about. And this is the same. I had to go through my challenges, and really, I should be asking you, young men, you're the ones that can see today. I've done my bit. I can tell you what happened to me, and I can say now, whatever you do, if you're doing it now, you must know whatever you're doing, you must know the product all the way through. Absolutely know your product. But then you've got technology. Now technology is fantastic. Yeah. If I wanted to make contact, I had a handful of American Express travelers checks, and I got on a plane and I flew around the world, all over. I had to do all that. Yeah, and when I got places, I could get into a hotel. If I wanted to phone somebody, I had to arrange with the reception and the telephonists that, can you get me a call through to the UK, to this number? And they would say, we'll call you back. Put the phone in. Sometimes it would be an hour. Sometimes they say, we can't get through today. We'll have to get your call in tomorrow. It's like, that was the amount of contact I had. Today, now, if you're starting today, yes, we were young, 23 and 25, we were young. And that's a good age. And, whatever it is you have your mind on right now, and mostly these days to make a big business is technology in whatever way you work. Making footwear, I don't know. I suppose there's room for somebody who's got some good ideas and got some good imagination. Of course there is. There always will be. But technology is one of the things you must know, and be young, if you're young enough. And it's only 7 days ago, Julie and I, we were in Paris meeting up with a young American, and he was celebrating his 21st birthday, and we've done a podcast with him. And on his way back he'd been to Monaco, he'd been to Saint-Tropez, and then he was in Paris, and we joined him in Paris for a meal. The day after, he was flying into New York to interview the CEO of the New York Stock Exchange, and he's only 21. But he's dynamic, and that's where it is. And so many people that come on now, and we have these meetings. They have podcasts. They're podcasters, and they've got thousands of people that the podcasts go out to. But they're young, and that's great, because that's the time when you're young. Mm. When I think my father and uncle, they've been through 2 world wars, and they had a company, but they were in the late 40s, probably early 50s. And it's a question of, they were too old, they were too set. They can't have that entrepreneurial imagination, or if they had the imagination, they knew too much to go there and start, to make that step into darkness. Is where this is it. We're just going for it. And so, if I'm 18, 19, 20 today, yes, it would be, wow, what's going on? Look at all this technology, we now go into space, things like this. Yeah. So there's, it is whatever your imagination, where your imagination could take you, you should follow it.
And use the tools that are available, regardless of whatever time you are in, I think.
Absolutely, yes, yeah. But, that's where life is. And it's you need to be young. To be an entrepreneur, you need to be young. You need to have that energy and, have that vision, something now which is tied up with technology. So, great time.
Yeah, so when you, after so many years and sweat and blood you put in Reebok, you built it to such a popular brand, you finally handed over the key to other people, right? How did you feel at that moment when it happened that, okay, let's give this to others to manage now?
Well, I handed over the key well before we became really big. And the reason for that was we needed funding. And for me, it was a question, well, is this Joe Foster or is this Reebok? Reebok has a chance. If I just sit here and hold on to all the shares and say, no, I'm not going to do this, then maybe Reebok will stay a small company. And it's like going to America. It's like, there is a goal and you've got to get there before, you've even got to get there before you can see where the goal is. And so bringing in other people was necessary to fund the company. When, the big thing came with aerobics. We had a tech rep in America, down in Los Angeles, and his wife was coming back from these aerobic classes, and I was saying, "What's aerobics? What's that?" And she's saying, "Well, we're exercising to music." So he went down to the next session that his wife was going to, and he saw the instructor with trainers, half the class wearing trainers, the other half wearing nothing, and he thought, "Why don't we make them on a woman's last?" It's a small and narrow last. On a woman's, why don't we make a shoe especially for them? He did, and Paul Feynman didn't want to know to begin with, because when he went to see Paul and suggested the idea, Paul said, "We're a running company. We're doing very nicely as a running company. And why do we want to make a few shoes for, some girls down in Los Angeles?" But our hill wasn't put off. He went to see Steve Liggett, who at that point was was in charge of manufacturing and in charge of product, and he persuaded Steve to get him 200 pairs, which he took down eventually to Los Angeles, gave it to the instructors, and that was it. The girls loved the shoes so much that even though at first they used to fall apart a bit, but they loved them so much that they went to work in them. They went everywhere in these shoes, not just to the aerobic classes. And then when Jane Fonda bought a pair, and Jane Fonda used them in a video we were wearing them in a video, fitness videos. It just took off. And all of a sudden we became a woman's company because that was it. You know, Reebok wasn't known that well in America. We were doing nicely in the running market, but Adidas and Nike, they were male, sweaty. All of a sudden we were nice. We were a woman's company. They perspired, they didn't sweat. This was such a nice company, and this was Reebok. And so we became a woman's company. And we went from, say, $9 million to $30 million for the next year, then $90 million, $300 million, and then $900 million in 4 years. So, you know, that was the growth. And then that's how it became really, really big. And then Hollywood, you know, we got all the Hollywood stars coming over to Monte Carlo to the Princess Grace Memorial Tennis Tournament. And you know, it was fantastic, incredible. And apart from putting it on America, after that, over the next, 10 years probably, I put on another 30 distributions around the world. So I was just going around the world. And yes, you know, to get there, I had to give the company. I had to get other people into the company because they needed also to feel they owned something. And, you know, people say, well, what would you change? Would you change? Well, you know, we became number one. We're bigger than Nike. We're bigger than Adidas. And we were the number one global sports brand. So it's hard to say what you would change because we succeeded. Reebok succeeded. The only thing I'm looking for now is to get that Shoemaker, the book. I want that to be a bestseller in America. I want to be a bestseller here. So we're working on that. We're working hard on that.
It will be definitely. And on the book, talking about the book and the events that you are talking now, in the book, if people will read it, they will realize that it feels the level of detail that you have given, like you are in the Chicago, you came out of the hotel and it was so chill and cold, and you went to the reception and etc. It looks like you remembered everything so clearly, event by event. I'm just curious. Of course, you told me before the interview that you started writing book 8 years ago, but still it has content from 1958. That's when the Reebok started, really. Did you write then? Like, were you a regular writer? You would write all your events, or you just recalled now 8 years ago when you started thinking of writing a book?
Yeah, it would have been good to have kept a diary. I think because the only problem I had with remembering things was the chronological order.
Right.
You know? And you know, you would remember if you were in Chicago in February, when everything comes to a halt and it's 2 or 3 foot of snow, and because the loop line had come off, the train had come off, and there were deaths, and you had to find your way back to the hotel, you would remember everything about that. Just like in Monaco, being invited into the palace to see Prince Rainier, to share a glass of champagne with him. You know, you remember these things. You know, so many things in Hollywood and wherever, they just stick in your mind, and that's it. And when I started writing the book, it was just so incredible how many things I remembered. You know, just when you start writing, but I know I did this, and oh yeah, I did that. So surprisingly enough, I suppose there's at least another book in there. In fact, I probably, in my drafts, I probably wrote more than twice what the book is. But wow. I had to have people telling me, look, you know, the book has to sort of read and just, you know, it has to be a read rather than you jumping over. So a lot of things that I put in there were anecdotal. So, you know, whilst they're anecdotes, you know, they're okay, they're interesting. Like, you know, I snapped my Achilles tendon playing badminton, and that was quite an episode. That I was due to go to America 5 days later, and I was told I needed an operation. So I had to go to the operation and have my leg in plaster, and providing I could walk with crutches, they would let me go. And so I did. But they had these crutches that go under your armpits. And a friend of mine had the elbow ones. You know, I think he brought his Achilles tendons. He was an athlete. And so he brought his to the airport as I'm getting on the plane. He brought his to the airport. So I gave him the wooden ones and got on the plane with the aluminium ones. And they gave me 3 seats because I'd got this leg. So they gave me 3 seats on the plane over to America. And on that plane, like half of the British sporting retailers were on because they were all going to the NSJ show. So I had company all the way. What have you done? You know, what's wrong with your leg? So I had to, you know, all these, I probably put too much into the into the story. So this has to be brought down to the fact. I think it does say that I did break my Achilles tendon, snap my Achilles tendon, but the story is much bigger than that. And so there are many stories. When I was going to Houston, and Houston was in the fog, and I was in New York waiting for the plane, and they said you can take this one that stops. I think it's about 6 different stops, or because, you know, if you take the one straight to Houston, it won't go to Houston; it'll get diverted. And even the one that I went on, we had all these stops, and they'd arrived at Fort Worth, and they couldn't get into Houston. They had to keep going backwards and forwards. We tried 3 times before we got in, and when we got in, it had been closed for about 3 days, and I got to collect my baggage, you know, because I've got 4 bags, all the same, and there was a heap of bags in the middle of the hall. It was tremendous size. You look at it and thought, oh, never going to find that. And I'm just looking around, and on a shelf, just beyond my 4 bags, because it all got Reebok on. Somebody taking them out and putting them on the shelf. I said, oh my goodness, how lucky. I went over, got my 4 bags and off for a taxi. So all these anecdotes, you know, they had to be trimmed down to make the book and to keep the book making a real sense. So yeah, there's probably another book of anecdotes.
Yeah, it's a good idea to keep a journal to record important incidents. Yeah. Okay. So now I know you're in 80s, but you look and feel and talk like you're in 60s still. What next?
Well, I say it's the book. You know, the book is the next thing. So we have people, we have invitations to go to America and speak in America. So we'll probably do that. We have lots of things. I'm picking up a Lifetime Achievement Award in London in September. So, you know, wow. There's lots of things. I can't tell you about it yet. They don't like me, but these are the things that we're doing. And okay, we're in France. We're going to leave France at the end of August, go back to the UK because we've got to go to a few meetings. So many people to meet in London at the moment. It's incredible. We have a list. It's almost too big to think we'll ever see everybody and meet everybody. But, you know, and there's a number of speaking tours as well. There's a few people want me to now speak to their people, which is good. You know, we're enjoying that. And yeah, so life is pretty full at the moment.
Wow, good. So, Joe, in the interest of time and only time, because I'm so loving talking to you, I can talk forever. But when you sit back and quiet and calm and look back at, you know, where you have come from and what have you created really, how do you feel? What kind of feeling at personal level when you're alone and thinking about your history?
Well, you know, now I can think about it and feel, wow, that was a fantastic ride, incredible. What a journey. I can think more of that now than at the time when I was doing it. And at that time, you're just so full of what's next and how can we move next and the things that are happening around you. But like you say, now I can sit back, relax, and you know, I did that, and that's why I started writing the book, because I sit back and I relaxed and thought, yeah, that's good. And so many people said, why don't you write your book? And I said, well, you know, I don't know. It's, you know, you just wonder why do you need to write a book? And then, as I say, Google, Wikipedia were telling me how Reebok started, and I said, no. And there was a photograph in there as well, that Joe Foster, founder of Reebok. I have no idea who it is. No idea. don't know him. So, it's like, no, we better get this straight. And so that was the reason for starting the book. And of course, it seems that a lot of people now are enjoying the book because like you, they're wondering, how do you persevere doing that? And I guess really, in a way, once you're in there, you're in the maze, and you've got to find your way to the center. You've got to do something, and there was always something to do. It wasn't a matter of sitting down and saying, well, I don't know what to do next. No, there was always a next. There was always at least something 2 or 3 steps ahead that we had to get through. So the journey wasn't a bore. The journey wasn't difficult. There were some sad times, some tough times, but in general, it was a journey, and I could remember it because so many things in life, you think, well, what happened over the last 5 years? What did I do? I can say that now. What did I do over the last 5 years? Well, not much, but I had those 30 years when it was full on, and that's why it sticks in my memory so well.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. There is one question which I ask all my guests, which is, what according to you are the top 3 skills or behaviors that everybody should have, but schools are not teaching in order to be successful?
I don't know if this, I think the skills that you've got to meet people. You've got to be able to meet people and talk to them. And you've got to look for help. People will help. In my book, you find there's people that are there to help. And it's finding those people. And so you've got to have a feeling that these are the right people, because putting on the wrong people, that's not good. So, and one of the most important things, they asked me 3 most important things about being in business. And I said, well, the first thing is to have fun. And the second thing is to have more fun. And the third thing, lots more fun. So, yeah. And I think that is really the secret of being in business. If you're not having fun, change, get out. You've got to have fun. Not every day is going to be fun, but if you get up with the wrong feeling, then that's not good. So it's being able to smile, it's being able to have fun, and it's always thinking that your glass is half full, not half empty. It's having the optimism, and if you can create that, and if you can get on with people, people will see you through. They will. And I think that's so important, very important. But if anybody asks me, should I do something? I don't try to give them advice. I just say, if you want to do it, just go, get on with it. Don't ask too many questions. Give it a try. You won't regret. Even if you fail, that's just a lesson. So you won't regret.
Take action. Okay. So network, have fun, take action, and have more fun and more fun. Wow, that's fun.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. And Joe, if people want to reach you, where they can go?
Oh, they can get us on social media. We're on, what are we on? Everything. We're on everything, which is LinkedIn.
I'll put everything in the link, all the links down here. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much for your time, Joe. I really thoroughly enjoyed it, and I learned a lot, even more after reading the book. Talking to you face to face was an amazing experience. Thanks a lot for that.
It's been a pleasure, Ajay. It really has. And if you want anything more, just contact Julie. We're here, and we're going to get that book to #1 between us.
Yes. And guys, if you are listening, have you enjoyed this interview? Go read the book. It is amazing. I'm telling you, it's not a normal business book. It is more than that. And every chapter has a lot of learning in it. So you will get a lot out of it. And if you have found some value from this interview, then don't forget to subscribe to this channel, because we are coming with amazing guests such as Joe every week. And you take care until next week. Goodbye.